afternoon. I'll call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council for May 5th, 2025. I'm the chair, Robert Lilligren, joined by a quorum of the committee, and I think this is my first time I've shared this committee with Councilmember Morales. So Diego, welcome. It's great to have you here. I think, maybe we've been together. I apologize for being late. Interstate 94 is horrendous, as you can imagine. I thought I had plenty of time. Anyway, I think just to kind of ground myself and center, I am going to read the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgment. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota and specifically the 7-county region is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. And before we go on with the agenda, I'll just note today is a National Day of Remembrance for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, an epidemic here in our country, and so many of us are wearing red to honor our stolen sisters. Miigwech. So we have an agenda in front of us, and now I've heard some conflicting direction. I was told that we did need a motion to approve agendas. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, okay. So we have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Any additions, corrections, discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next is approval of the April 21st, 2025 Community Development Committee minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Council Members Morales and Carter. Any additions, corrections, discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
We have approved minutes. Committee members, we have one non-consent business item today. It's item 2025-122. It's the adoption of the 2025 Community Development Committee Work Plan. Director Barajas will present. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division. It's my pleasure to be in front of you today to talk about the 2025 Community Development Committee Work Plan. As you have heard over the last several meetings in February, March, and April, we've had updates from, and sort of deep dives, if you will, from our 5 large program areas around planned work for the course of 2025. Hearing both from Metro HRA around program updates in February and in March, and then from each of our departments in our regional planning department around work plans that really are focused around implementation of Imagine 2050. So in the business item in front of you, you will see both a written out version of all of the high level items or projects or programs that will be in front of the committee over the course of this year. And you will see initiatives in particular where they are work unit specific, marked with an asterisk under each of the work units under regular business. And then on page 3, towards the bottom third of the page, a heading called 2025 Initiatives, which highlights specifically cross-divisional work within community development, either our cross-work unit work or interdivisional work that community development is leading. Then some of that you'll hear about tonight as well, including things like system statements. And then following that, you'll see on pages 4 and 5, a visual representation of what that schedule would look like for this year, where the colors are darker shaded in yellow and green is where we have known scheduled time or action, so an information item or an action item on your calendar, and where it's a lighter color, a lighter yellow or a lighter green is either where we aren't quite sure when, we'll say like fourth quarter sometime. We'll have that in front of you as an example. Or for the lighter green shading is in response to applications that we receive. For example, amendments to comprehensive plans, amendments to grants, those types of things that are really generated by our local government partners in which we have to respond to them on an ongoing basis. So you can see we've been working to really ensure that we are spreading items across the course of the year. And we know that the end of the year can be pretty loaded heavily with all of the other actions that we need to take by the end of the year, and that the timeframes can be tight with the different holidays that we have off. So we've been working to schedule things in the summer months as well as in early fall as well. So with that, before I turn back to the committee, I just want to highlight some additional initiatives. As I've noted, we've really turned, in the regional planning department, turned to implementation on Imagine 2050. As our Metro HRA team members have shared with you all, we are really in preparations for the new state rent assistance program, Bring It Home, as well as implementing new requirements from HUD called Inspire and HOTMA. Our favorite acronyms are implementation of Housing Opportunities through Modernization Act and implementation of national standards for the physical inspection of real estate. So not really Inspire, but really close to Inspire, that our team members had shared the details with you about earlier this year. So we'll be happy to come back and talk more about how that implementation is going later on. And then, of course, continuing the exploration of wealth building opportunities and programs for voucher holders, as our team had shared earlier this year. A couple of other highlights. About 5 years ago, the council adopted its first regional economic framework, which enables entities across the region to be eligible for and compete for funds from the Federal Department of Economic Development. And also helps organize an economic strategy for the region. We are due for a 5-year update that our team is working on, and they'll be coming in front of this committee and the full council to talk more about that work and who our partners are in that work. And then, as you all know, we also have a first of its kind community tree planting grant program, which our team members, and thank you to Councilmember Wolf for participating on the review committee for those applications. We had a great response. More than $5 million worth of requests for a $2.5 million program, but more to come when those applications come back later this year. So with that, I'm happy to turn back to the committee and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Barajas. I appreciate the work, your whole team, obviously. This is a very full work plan, and I appreciate it. One thing I'm going to really lift up is on the report, the invited speaker and panel presentations, and we haven't done one for a while, but we have done them in the past. Sometimes they're staff presentations on a special area of interest. Sometimes they're outside speakers as well. So I just want to make sure committee members are aware that's an option. If you have recommendations, I'm sure Lisa would be happy to entertain them. I would be, so please bring something forward if there's an area you're looking to dig a little deeper in. Discussions, questions, suggestions on that report. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that has popped into my head, we get the residential development trends presentation annually, I think, but it's always lagging back a year or two because, the government moves slowly. So maybe one possibility would be to get a presentation that's more timely, like what realtors and developers use on what's going on now instead of what happened in 2023.
So some real-time reporting and data. That's a great idea.
Mr. Chair, committee
please.
members, I'm happy to share that back with our team. We use our own residential building permit survey, which thankfully we've been seeing increasing participation rates from local governments on that too. And that's always a look back survey. So being 2025, we'll be getting 2024 data. That's how we can compare across many times, but I can talk with our team. As you all know, we do purchase data from a number of other different vendors and use that sort of data for things like our rent trends that help inform setting small area fair market rents for HRA. So there may be other things that we can share as a part of that as well. Those are always subject to confidentiality things and what's reportable, but I'll let them decide on what's available or what's not. But I'm happy to share that back with the team.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Further discussions, comments, questions, suggestions on this work plan? And of course, as we move through the year, there's opportunities to amend this or to
Absolutely.
adapt it as things come up. Yep, cool. Well, great. I thought there would be more comments on this, but good job. Director Barajas, did you want to close with something? Or?
I would just ask that you adopt the committee
Oh,
work
that's
plan
right.
and then we can move
So
forward.
I would entertain a motion that the Community Development Committee adopt the proposed committee work plan for 2025 as outlined in this business item.
Move approval.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
That carries, and we have an adopted work plan. Congratulations. The rest of our agenda are information items, very interesting ones. The first is the decennial system statement, and Amber Turquist is here to present. Welcome, Amber.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee.
Ms. Turquist, is this your first time presenting in
It
committee?
is.
All right, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Amber Turnquist. I'm a senior planner and sector rep with local planning assistance in community development, presenting to you today on decennial system statements. As an overview, I will be discussing statutory direction for system statements, how we get to a final system statement, the procedure for disputes, and next steps. As you know, we are always somewhere in the regional planning cycle. When census results are released, the Council prepares the Regional Development Guide. Imagine 2050 was adopted in February, along with the regional plan system, plans and policies that set the long-range policy foundation for housing, regional parks and trails, transportation, and water. This means we move from policy and system planning to the fourth stage, issuing system statements, after which the Council develops guides and training to assist communities as they prepare their local comprehensive plan updates. Then local plan implementation, subsequent plan amendments, and the cycle begins again. Statutory direction outlines when system statements are issued, what is included in them, and the process to manage disputes. System statements are issued when the Council updates or revises its comprehensive development guide. We refer to these as decennial system statements. We also issue system statements if there are amendments to regional plans. We typically only do this once, and we refer to those as mid-cycle system statements. Statute also provides direction on the content of system statements, which I'll talk about more in a moment. After adoption of the Regional Development Guide, the Metropolitan Land Planning Act requires that the Met Council provide each of the 188 local governments with a system statement. System statements contain information from the Regional Development Guide and are individualized reports that inform communities on key changes to the regional plan, forecasted growth, development expectations, and considerations affecting them. This document is used by communities to review their comprehensive plan and to prepare updates. They also serve as a reminder to communities that comp plans need to be ready in 3 years. System statements will be distributed in September of 2025. Each system statement provides information on community designations, forecasted growth, climate, and as applicable, affordable housing allocation numbers, highways, transit routes and facilities, aviation information, metropolitan sewer service, subsurface treatment systems, surface water, regional parks, and regional trails. Imagine 2050 contains systems and policy plans. System statements inform communities about the changes between the 2040 and 2050 development guides generally, and information relevant to them specifically. The Local Planning Handbook provides tools, maps, and resources to update comprehensive plans. If there are no concerns with the system statement, it is considered final 60 days after issuance. Concerns with statements are typically resolved through discussions between local governments and their sector reps. The reconciliation procedure, if an agreement cannot be reached, is that the community submits a resolution requesting a hearing within 60 days of receipt. That resolution must describe the agreement and propose specific amendments. The dispute procedure is as follows. Discussion with the sector rep, request a hearing within 60 days, LUAC or the Office of Administrative Hearing holds a hearing within 60 days of the request, and then a report is transmitted to the council, which makes a final determination based on that report. As a high-level overview and reminder, system statements will be distributed in September of this year. By December 2025, statements are considered final if a request for a hearing has not been received. If there is a hearing, reports are submitted to the council by January 2026. By December 31st, 2028, local governments will have completed their comprehensive plans. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks for the excellent report, Ms. Turnquist. Questions on that report? Yeah, Councilmember Carter.
This is a journey to which I look forward, and a very, very interesting, well thought out process, I might add. Having completed the Regional Development Guide, I am very curious to examine, and I know I can find this and do so, cases where we have issued system statements, we have heard appeals, and to see the process as it moves forward more upfront. So I'll look for those, and if you have any particular suggestions, would greatly appreciate those examples. I also, and looking back at 8, I failed to hear, and maybe you said, and I just didn't, when the determination is made in step 3, whether a hearing is held by LUAC or the Office of Administrative Hearings. What is the difference?
Either. The community can request which body hears their request.
Okay, and so that too is a very interesting process to me. I'll be looking forward to it. Thank you for this information. We have a long process and a lot that can happen in it. And knowing that it is prepared in this way, that you're being very, very thoughtful about how to manage to those system statements, getting them out to our communities, and also the responses, and ensuring that there are answers and resolutions where possible within a tight period of time. And if not, that there is a fair process of moving through toward resolution is really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I think Director Barajas may want to comment on your first piece about what our experience has been.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. In the last 2 planning cycles, the council has only held 2 hearings, 1 in each cycle. Most requests or disputes, as they're called under the law, are resolved pretty easily among staff and brought forward, they're usually pretty straightforward and usually are related to forecasts. The last cycle, we had a request from the city of Oak Grove regarding our plans for sewer service for them and related land use densities to hold for a post-2040 designation that they requested to be heard in front of the Office of Administrative Hearings. And so we did that whole process working with our general counsel and then coming to the full council after that determination was made by the judge for the final adoption. In the 2005 cycle, the case was following the Supreme Court case with the city of Lake Elmo. Yeah. And the system statement hearing that they were requesting was also related to their community designation for their unsewered portion of their area, which they thought should not be designated. They thought it was, as part of the settlement out of the lawsuit, should be different than what was designated in the plan. So that's what that hearing was held at the Land Use Advisory Committee, but it was held very much like a court proceeding. We had outside folks come to help support that, typing up transcripts, holding that in very formalized fashion.
Thank you for that information. Those will be easy to find.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of materials, so we're happy to share. At least the last one, the Oak Grove one, is, I believe, still on our website that we can share that link.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further discussion on the report? Further discussion?
Really good report.
Okay, well, we look forward to returning with more information as the system plans are developed and seeing them released this fall. So
Thank you, Chair and
Thank
council
you.
members.
Thank you, Ms. Turnquist. We'll move to our next information item. The clock is freaking me out every time I look at it. All right, it is not 1:05. It's item 2, local planning handbook update. Ms. Dvorak is here to report, and I just want to say this is very exciting. This is my interest of this committee, as long as I've been here, to give more support to local planning, and I feel like the next 2 items are both touching on that, so I look forward to hearing the progress. Ms. Dvorak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. My name is Emma Dvorak. I'm a senior planner and sector representative with Local Planning Assistance and Community Development. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the Local Planning Handbook, the Met Council's primary tool in connecting communities to the Council's many technical assistance resources. I will start with an overview of the Local Planning Handbook website and walk through some of the updates underway for the 2050 planning cycle and the engagement and feedback that has informed those changes. Then I will outline what to expect before the launch of the new website, as well as the work that will continue over the course of the 2050 comp planning period. The Local Planning Handbook is a one-stop shop online resource for local communities to access tools, data, and technical assistance that will help them build out their comprehensive plans. The Local Planning Handbook provides important community-specific information such as growth forecasts, affordable housing need requirements, sewer allocation projections, and several required maps. It also houses an individualized checklist that is unique for each community to help them track their progress and the community system statement. The Local Planning Handbook is undergoing a complete update to align with Imagine 2050 and is scheduled to launch in August 2025. A key feature of the Local Planning Handbook is the required plan elements pages, which highlight each system and policy area and provide a specific landing page for resources and information that will aid communities in completing that chapter of their plan. As part of the update process, we are working with each subject area to update the new site information and resources consistent with Imagine 2050. The Local Planning Handbook also houses an individualized profile for every community called Community Pages. Through Community Pages, local planning staff are connected to information that is specific and tailored to them. Each community page, all 188 of them, contain information that local planners will use to build out their comp plans, including a unique checklist, forecast data, and the community system statement. Local staff also utilize these profiles to submit and track the progress of comp plan updates and amendments. In addition to the topic-specific resources on plan element pages and the community-specific resources on community pages, the Local Planning Handbook allows local governments access to a full online resource library, which includes templates, fact sheets, full guidelines, best practices, webinars, and local examples that communities can utilize to enhance their comp plans. Here's an example of one of those resources. This is just one example of how the council provides guidance to communities to go above and beyond the minimum requirements. To ensure that the updated website meets the needs of users, usability testing was conducted on the original site and will be conducted again before the new site launches. With the help of CD Research, the Local Planning Handbook team was able to observe and record volunteer users as they completed activities on the existing site. 6 test users were selected from the local planning community. Approximately 80% of usability issues can be identified with even a small sample size. In addition to task-based observations, interviews with users about their work environment, preferences, and most valued resources have helped further inform website improvements. The website testing so far has led us to make several organizational and accessibility changes. Helping communities know where they can start by creating a dedicated tab that brings crucial resources such as system statements and individualized checklists right to the top of the page. We also added an interactive regional map that allows communities to view dozens of data layers for their community in a regional context. A resource tab will allow communities to download their spatial data, quickly find information about grant eligibility, and access various tools provided by the Met Council. The minimum requirements checklist is among the most critical resources that communities will encounter on the local planning handbook. Therefore, it's essential that the checklist is accessible, helpful, and intuitive for communities. Local planning assistants convened 2 cohorts to discuss minimum requirements, one for developed and one for developing communities. Cohorts were made up of both new and experienced planners and planning professionals in the region. These discussions were intended to ensure that new requirements were aligned with the Imagine 2050 regional vision, assess the clarity and accessibility of guidance materials, and identify any gaps in available tools and resources. During the focus groups, we heard a lot of valuable feedback. Many found that the local planning handbook and checklist to be helpful resources, but they also made it clear that there was definitely room for improvement. Local governments told us they needed clearer guidance on what was required versus what was recommended. Communities asked for stronger coordination across policy areas so that things don't feel as siloed or disconnected between those areas. Participants expressed the need for additional guidance on how the council will calculate net density, support ADUs, and help communities with development staging and growth projections. Communities value the support of sector representatives and technical assistance provided by the council, and they want that kind of engagement and outreach to continue and grow. Focus groups also reviewed the draft minimum requirements for the 2050 planning cycle. Overall, approximately 70% of the requirements are unchanged from the 2040 cycle. The additional 30% includes requirements around climate and natural systems planning, strengthening regional and local transportation plans with a comprehensive pedestrian element, mapping drinking water supply management areas and their vulnerabilities, and the new residential net density minimum requirements and product type requirements. There's still a lot of work to be done on the local planning handbook website. Staff in all divisions continue to support the website update through the creation of new resources, tools, and website enhancements in preparation for launch in August 2025. After the site is launched, it will continue to be updated throughout the entire 2050 comp planning period to ensure that more tools, education, and training and resources centered around going beyond the minimum requirements are available on the site. We will also use the site to highlight communities who are doing innovative work. Local Planning Assistance has identified long-term site improvements, including a density tracking tool which communities can use to visualize the impact of land use adjustments on net density requirements before submitting an amendment. Our goal is to make this site not just a compliance tool, but a launchpad for innovative comprehensive planning. The updated site will be a living resource, helping communities move from policy to action with clarity and confidence. Thank you for your time this evening. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Dvorak, for your report, for your work on this, and for the whole team that's putting this together. And I have a couple questions, and then I'll turn to committee members if that's cool. And one of them I really take to heart, because you hear this a lot in government about siloing, right? And the lack of across enterprise coordination. So I'm just wondering, we took this different approach to Imagine 2050, where we're kind of doing all the different plans simultaneously and with less separation. And I'm just wondering how that, if that has impacted our ability to be less siloed in our approach with the handbook.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key process changes for this round is that we have a dedicated and intentional period of internal review of comp plan minimum requirements. So again, this is the minimum requirements required for a comprehensive plan update. And each division separately drafts those requirements. And this time we've ensured that there was cross-coordination between all divisions, that they were reading each other's work and commenting on those, having consistent language, understanding who was going to review which type of requirement and what the expectations would be. And through that collaboration period, we were able to release a much more coordinated list for a first draft of external review.
Great, thanks. Great example. And the other question I had, I love the site is a living resource, right? In that this will lift up sort of innovative practices or what communities are doing. How do we decide what's worth lifting up and making available to the rest of the region?
So the local planning highlights is something that is kind of ongoing after the launch of the updated local planning handbook site. And we would highlight work in communities that is aligned with council regional goals and practices, communities that are doing innovative work, and especially work that can be repurposed or as an example for other areas across the region. So those are housed on the local planning handbook site.
Oh, thank you. Committee members, discussion, questions on this report? Councilmember Carter.
A massive amount of information is available to us because of the role that we play for local planning and local planning assistance. And I really appreciate seeing the manner in which this information is organized for our communities to use in this process. I am wondering too, because it is so much information, if we are, and I know we've asked questions about this, and I'm probably duplicating a question that I've asked already, but asking it again in a new setting. Can you tell me how far along we are in providing this sort of information that is not just specific to a page for local planning, but that is available and searchable for other purposes? You know, if we are looking, for example, for income within the region and wanting to see income distributed by community or something of that sort. That's just a wild example. Are we able to search this information, or is it specific to each sheet for each community that we're able to find it today? And I know that there are plans to enhance what we're able to do. Thank you.
Yes, so the existing local planning handbook site, which is centered around Thrive 2040, all resources related to Thrive 2040 are available on that site. They are organized in such a way that they are searchable by policy area or topic area. However, a lot of the resources are in kind of an individualized PDF format. So that means that if you're searching on a page, you might not find exactly what you're looking for without, maybe digging into those a little bit. Part of the accessibility testing that we did was to determine how well communities and local planners are able to find the resources that we're looking for. And that was very informative in ways that we are tagging information, restructuring the site, bringing the most important critical information to the top of the page. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
And, it does sound very specific today to that function, the local planning function, and to the information that individual communities need. I'm so very happy that it's there and appreciate how it's organized for those communities. And also looking very forward to the enhancement of our open data, if you will, for the future. Thank you.
Of course.
Great, agree. Councilmember Lee, further discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for this presentation. I appreciate that you all took the time and thoughtfulness to have a focus group. As we do outreach and support our communities, it's our responsibility to make sure that our resources and interface are the most relevant and user-friendly to the clients or the cities. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Lee. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On these don't have numbers on them, the slide that says there's 30 to 35% new or significantly updated requirements is kind of concerning to me, because I see that as adding a lot of work for our communities, whether, it's things that are populated in the planning handbook or things that they have to have consultants do or do on their own. Is that on the minimum requirements, or is that on all the things you could possibly do?
So those are related to the minimum requirements. So the council has now new and different goals that from 2040 to 2050, and a new checklist of minimum requirements was drafted to align with those goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah.
I appreciate the answer to the question. It's still worrisome to me
was
because
a
I
little
want
startling.
to. I want to make sure that what we're doing adds value to cities and not just work and cost. Because if all we're doing is adding work and cost, that sends them back to the legislature to say we want to get rid of the Met Council. If it truly adds value, then we're working in partnership. But
A comment from Director Barajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I would add that some of our requirements are related to statutory requirements. So And as you know, our teams have been working very hard to ensure, not just in the new statutory requirements, but in all of our minimum requirements, that we can produce as much of that baseline information as we can to support that inclusion in their local plan. So trying to ease that burden as much as we can. And I also just want to remind folks too that while we do have some new goal areas, that there has been work done, as Emma was saying, to coordinate across our work to ensure that what our requirements have been in the past are actually integrated with one another. So there may be updated requirements that aren't actually new, but actually have simplified things, but they are significantly updated from what they might have been last time. I think this is going to be true across a number of areas. Like, did we say this the right way? This clearly was hard for folks to understand last time, so we should update that to make it clearer. It may not necessarily be a new thing, but hopefully the update makes it easier for them to understand what we were looking for originally.
Thank you.
Thank you. An excellent point. 30 to 35% doesn't mean 30 to 35% more work, right? It might mean some of that actually means less work. So yeah, but I was a little startled by that number myself. Cool. Further discussion on this report? Any further discussion? Hearing none. Great work. Look forward to seeing these enhancements, as Councilmember Carter called them. And thanks for your work, Ms. Dvorak. And our final information item today is the Planning Assistance Grant Program and the Small Communities Planning Program. And Angela Torres is here to present, and Merritt Clapp-Smith as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. It's good to be in front of you again. My name is Angela Torres. I'm the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance. I'm here with Merritt Clapp-Smith, who is a Senior Planner on the Local Planning Assistance team. She has been doing the program assessment and is the project manager for some of the new work that you'll be hearing about today, and she'll speak to that in a little bit. So we're excited today. You've heard a lot from my team, and they are such dedicated, conscientious planners that have been local planners, and so they've been through the comprehensive planning process on many aspects of it, both at the council through amendments as well as developing comp plans themselves. So we're excited to be talking to you more about implementation projects for Imagine 2050. I gave you a preview when we talked about the local planning assistance work plan, and now you've heard both about system statements and local planning handbook update. I want to emphasize that these, even though you're hearing about system statements and local planning handbook and now these two programs, that's actually not all of what we do too. So there's many other things that are in addition to just the things that we're talking about today. So there's a huge puzzle piece, a huge puzzle and lots of pieces to put that together and how we assist local governments with their comprehensive planning. Today, I'm going to share some background about the Planning Assistance Grant Program. I know some of you are really well versed in the program, and others, this will be an introduction. Merritt will talk about the analysis and potential updates to the eligibility criteria, and then I'll wrap it up sharing some next steps before we get to have a discussion with a few question prompts for the committee today. We always like to kind of set the foundation. It's like, how are we enabled to do this work? The Metropolitan Land Planning Act identifies local planning assistance specifically in statute. It enables the council to provide planning services and assist with local comprehensive planning. It also identifies the purpose being primarily for local comprehensive plans, fiscal devices, and official controls. Sometimes it's not clear what is a fiscal device, what's an official control. An example of a fiscal device is a capital improvement plan program, or an example of official controls is zoning and subdivision ordinances. And so those are all the things that we're enabled to provide assistance to local governments on. Statute also enables the council to provide grants, loans, and other types of assistance to support communities in updating their local comprehensive plans. That provision of assistance is based on demonstrated need and availability of fiscal resources. It's up to the Met Council to determine how we assess demonstrated need, and that's been some of the work that the Land Use Advisory Committee has kicked off earlier this year. We'll get into some of the background. The Council's Planning Assistance Fund has been used to provide grants to eligible communities in previous comprehensive planning rounds to assist them with those updates. This table shows the funding categories and communities served in the past 2 planning rounds. The rows show the type of communities served. The columns show the number of grants and funding levels provided for both the 2030 and 2040 planning cycles. During the Regional Development Framework in 2030, 50 local communities were eligible for grants ranging from $15,000 to $50,000. During Thrive MSP 2040, 70 communities were eligible for funding ranging from $10,000 to $84,000. The 3 county and consortium grants supported comprehensive plan updates for 33 townships and rural centers in Dakota, Scott, and Carver counties. Those are larger collaborative
Sorry
efforts.
to interrupt you, Phil.
Sure.
Just so I'm clear on this.
Yes.
So what we're looking at now is a graph of utilization of the program, correct? Not just eligibility.
Eligibility, there's almost always full utilization of the program because it's non-competitive. There have been a few instances where we didn't issue the last half of the grant, just because sometimes it's difficult for the smallest communities to complete their plans on time. And we got to where it was 3 and 4 years after the deadline, and we just didn't issue the last half. We didn't claw back any of the first half, though. And so usually it's fully extended.
Great, thank you.
It wasn't enough of a difference for me to put it on the table, for example. So any other questions on this before I move on? Okay.
Please.
The criteria used to determine grant eligibility for the 2030 and 2040 cycles were net tax capacity, measured as overall for the community in the 2030 planning round, and measured as per capita in the 2040 planning cycle. Also, the 30-year population growth rate, current population, and with the consortium approach, we provided grants to Scott and Carver County to do land use planning for the townships within their boundaries, or to a group of 5 or more communities who work together on updates on their comprehensive plans for both 2030, as an example, the only example actually, for both 2030 and 2040 planning cycles, a group of Dakota County communities, both townships and small cities, collaborated under a consortium grant. So to make their planning work more efficient and more cost-effective for themselves, they kind of banded together with a shared consultant and did that work. The criteria for the consortium approach were not geographically restricted, and other groups could have applied, even though we established that knowing that Dakota County Collaborative has done their planning in that manner for now 20 years. So. In the 2040 Thrive grant, Thrive MSP 2040 grants primarily served rural and suburban communities. This map shows the communities that received grants in the 2040 planning cycle. You can see the county and consortium grant communities in blue. Carver and Scott counties will continue to receive a grant, and the small, well, we're proposing. And the small rural Dakota County communities are also proposed to still have an option to do the consortium grant again if they wish. Many of the eligible small cities shown on this map in orange will be eligible in this round under the Small Communities Planning Program, which Merritt will talk about here shortly, or based on the revised grant criteria. That we're proposing as well. The eligible communities under the general grant criteria are shown in green, and that will shift somewhat from larger cities to small and medium cities with financial constraints. Merritt will walk you through that assessment now. So I'll turn it over to Merritt for her slide.
Thank you. Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Merritt Clapsmith. I am a senior planner on the LPA team and a sector representative for Districts 10 and 12. I'm pleased to be supporting Angela as we examine 2 of the planning assistance programs for Imagine 2050. In each comprehensive planning cycle, staff and the council consider which communities need most assistance to update their comprehensive plans and how we can support them. One primary way has been through planning assistance grants, and more recently, the council has discussed the idea of direct technical assistance. Since fall 2024, we have been researching grant and direct assistance options for Imagine 2050. First, who needs the most help? We posed this question to council colleagues, community planners, and planning consultants who worked with many types of communities during the 2040 plan update cycle. Their answers were very consistent in identifying population and financial capacity as the biggest determinants of need. The second effort of analysis was to simplify the proposed revisions to the eligibility criteria for assistance. We tested changes to criteria that would better serve smaller and financially constrained communities with grants or direct service under a new small communities program. The third step was analyzing changes to who would be served compared to the 2040 grant cycle. The new criteria would provide the same number of direct grants to 63 communities, plus 2 county grants to Scott and Carver County to plan for 21 townships. More small and medium-sized communities would be served instead of the largest communities in the region under the proposed adjustment to criteria. And more inner-ring suburban communities would be served, where growth has slowed and tax base is declining, but redevelopment planning needs are high. What did we learn from the 2040 grant cycle? First, grants are very appreciated. As Angela mentioned, just about everybody that's eligible for a grant does take one, but these grants aren't covering the full cost of their planning needs. The total costs of the plan updates varied widely as reported by our grantee communities, even between communities of similar size and situation. Some places decide to do a completely new plan, where others are largely doing an update of what's needed. Generally, the larger the city, the more money they spend. And meanwhile, some of the small communities, as mentioned, even with grants, struggle to update their plans. Planners and consultants largely agreed on 3 key determinants of need. First, the population of a community largely determines its capacity to conduct a plan update based on the size of its staff and budgets. Some regional communities only have a part-time clerk as their staff and maybe an on-call planner, while larger cities have multiple planning staff, public works departments, parks planners, and the capacity to manage consultants. Second, financial capacity is the amount of money that may be available to hire staff or consultants for the work. There are some very small communities that are quite wealthy, so although they lack staff, they are seen as having the financial ability to hire consultants if they choose to do so. Financial capacity is being seen as the financial ability to hire. The third finding is that the level of planning needed in new, higher growth communities is similar to that of older, slow growth communities, which are focused on infill and redevelopment, which can be quite challenging to plan for. So let's talk about potential updates to the programs and the criteria. Based on continued observations that very small communities struggle with updating their comprehensive plans, the Met Council's been talking for a couple of years about initiating a new direct planning assistance program focused on very small and resource-constrained communities. A new small communities program is proposed to launch for the 2050 planning cycle. So let's briefly look at it here. The program's intent would be to provide direct professional planning services through the LPA team to the region's smallest communities to update their local comprehensive plans. The goal is to reduce the burden of the comprehensive plan updates for those smallest communities who have the least capacity to manage them. And the method would be to create staff capacity in LPA team to lead technical work for the updates for up to 30 communities. Those communities would still play the lead on kind of their community engagement conversations around priorities and vision and land use policy, but the LPA staff team would be working on all of the technical aspects of a comprehensive plan update. The program would run through the LPA team, as I said, and we're shooting right now for eligibility for about 30 communities, but eligibility is optional. It may be that some communities will determine they're not comfortable with their plan update being led in-house, and so at this point, we're saying it might be about 20 to 30 communities. So this program concept has been discussed with the LUAC Land Use Advisory Committee in January and March, and the committee strongly supports the program. So how are we proposing to update the eligibility criteria for grants and the new program? This slide compares the planning assistance criteria for the 2050 planning cycle, which is shown in the orange box, to potential revised criteria for the 2050 grant, shown in the middle, and the new small communities program on the right. The grant criteria for smaller communities would continue to be based on net tax capacity per capita equal to or less than 125% of the regional median, which is calculated as 100%. The grant criteria for medium and larger cities would also continue to be the same at equal to or less than 100% of the metro median. The key changes proposed to the grant criteria would be that 30-year growth rate would no longer be used as a criteria. And this is based on the observation that cities of all ages and growth rates have different but similar levels of planning need. The second key change is that cities with a population over 35,000, that's current population, would no longer be eligible for grants, with the intention of shifting more planning assistance to support to small and medium-sized cities. The proposed criteria for the new small communities program are similar, but have different thresholds. Only communities under a current population of 2,500 people would be eligible. Net tax capacity per capita would increase slightly as a threshold as community size decreases, since a very small community has a limited tax base, even if that tax base is slightly higher per capita. This table is very detailed and a bit hard to read, but it does give you a sense of how the eligibility criteria number of communities served compares between 2040 and the proposed 2050 criteria, and with the addition of the small communities program. I want to note that previously Angela had mentioned that in 2040, 70 communities were served with grants. What this table is showing is that with all of the updated data for net tax capacity, current population, and growth rates, if we were to apply that same criteria for 2040, which is shown on the white rows at the top, 63 communities would now be eligible. We are proposing the shift in criteria for 2050 that is scaled to continue to provide grant service to 63 communities. Again, we have removed the criteria for growth rate and have limited grants to cities that are fewer than 35,000 population. For 2040 and as proposed for 2050, we would continue with the county grants and the consortium grants for communities of 5 or more. However, the current eligibility criteria for the consortium only states 5 or more communities. What we've seen is the Dakota County rural and adjacent communities are the ones that are utilizing it, and this makes sense that it's appropriate in those contexts. So we may want to consider explicitly stating this round that the consortium approach would be for rural and geographically proximate communities. The blue rows show the 3 sets of criteria that would provide eligibility for 30 communities under the Small Communities Program, being at this point 30 communities. Based on the currently proposed criteria for 2050, there is no overlap between communities that might be eligible for a grant and the Small Communities Program. So at least 95 communities in the region could receive comprehensive planning assistance. All right, now the clickers. It really wants you to look at this table for a very long time.
It's detailed. I'm not sure.
Is there another way?
Yep, I can.
Okay.
Oh, maybe not.
This is the most exciting part of the presentation.
It is, Margaret. There we go.
Okay, phew. All right. The next 4 slides compare the types of communities that would be served under the 2040 grant criteria, shown with the orange bars, the 2050 grant criteria, shown in light blue, and the 2050 Small Communities Program. So for each of these slides, we're kind of comparing who's served in a number of different ways. This slide shows service levels by community designation. And what you can see is that the same or more communities would get assistance across all designations in 2050, with a significant improvement in service to agricultural, rural residential, and urban edge communities. Here we see assistance based on current population size. Service significantly improves to communities with populations under 500 and those with populations between 5,000 and 25,000, so what I call the medium-sized communities. Communities with population over 35,000 would no longer be eligible for grants. This shows community service based on net tax capacity per capita. More communities are eligible in 2050, except with those with net tax capacity per capita over 175,000. You can see that the Small Communities Program serves very small communities with higher net tax capacity per capita than were served under 2040 planning grants. Again, with the rationale being that the budgets of very small communities are modest relative to the cost of a comprehensive plan update. And finally, on this image, we see 30-year growth rate and levels of service. More communities with low growth rates become eligible, typically urban edge, and some suburban communities that are aging and fiscally constrained. Nevertheless, service to high growth rate communities declines only slightly and actually increases in the highest growth communities that exceed 35% population growth rate over 30 years. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Angela.
I'm going to talk a little bit about timeline and next steps and then get to the most important part, which is the discussion. Here you'll see that the plan is to continue with additional discussions with the Land Use Advisory Committee throughout the summer, with a planned recommendation coming to the CDC in September. We do plan to come back to the CDC before that, though, again in August, to give an update of the work and prior to any formal recommendations from the Land Use Advisory Committee. That will give us time then to incorporate any additional feedback from the CDC before there is an actual LUAC recommendation. Hopefully with the LUAC recommendation to the CDC in September, the CDC would make a recommendation to the council, and the council would consider adoption of the program eligibility criteria in early October. In December, the council will adopt the unified budget, and the funds for these two programs will be a part of that action. We are trying to solidify the program criteria well before the end of the year, knowing that at the end of the year, the schedule and calendar gets really tight in that last quarter. So Also, we need to make sure that we have a program guide ready for early 2026 when we issue the notice of funding availability, which opens the application period for local governments. We expect to hold that application period open for 5 or 6 months, knowing that the community would have to take local action, adopting a resolution to enter into agreement with us for grant contract. This is a tentative schedule, subject to the adjustments as committee discussions may require more time. This schedule sets us up to be able to hire staff for the program in Q2 and Q3 of 2026, in time for the onset of all of the work that we're anticipating. I mentioned the unified budget, and I just want to expand on that a little bit. Heather Giesel, who is the Director of Finance for CD and MTS. I apologize if she's an executive director, I don't know. She's a director of finance for us, and she'll be back here at your next meeting talking about the operating budget info item, and we'll discuss in more detail and can answer any questions. We do expect, though, that the grant and small communities program costs together will be around $3.5 to $4 million. It will be funded by a transfer from the general fund over a 5-year period to align with the expected disbursements to grantees. Heather will talk more about that when she's here at the next meeting. I just wanted to let you know that we do have a plan for funding these 2 programs. We do also, I'm also planning additional support through division and departmental funds, specifically for the small communities planning program engineering costs, which are actually the bulk of the cost for that particular program. We have shared a lot of information with you today, and we want to hear your feedback on the eligibility criteria for the 2 programs. Let us know if you have any additional direction for the Land Use Advisory Committee as they continue their work, and let us know also if you have any information, you need more information to inform your future decisions on the eligibility criteria as well. But I would like to open it up now for discussion. Turn that back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Torres, Ms. Clapp-Smith, and I think this is very exciting to get to this point. And for as long as I've been on this committee and on this council, this is my interest in moving toward giving support to communities and doing required work, but it can often be a burden. And especially the new Small Communities Planning Program, and this is a change for those who are newer to the committee and to the council, where we would be taking, I think Ms. Clapp-Smith used the term in-house, right? And I'm not surprised that there may be some unwillingness by some communities to do that, but at least we're making an offer, right? And I know that this kind of support has been happening informally for years, and so it's nice to actually kind of formalize it, budget it, and to really offer this assistance. And I'm excited about the modifications or the proposed modifications even to the planning assistance grant program. I mean, it shows that we're doing our due diligence, right, and trying to be responsive as the regional government. So committee members, we have prompt questions, or I'm sure Ms. Torres or Ms. Clapp-Smith would be happy to hear any feedback you have. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support the small cities thing. That's been something that I've been harping on for a very long time.
I bet you feel heard.
I am a little concerned, though, about excluding all cities over 35,000, and particularly with changing the minimum density for the suburban edge. There are some communities that are going to be adding 20,000 people at a new density, which is going to require a lot of extra work, and we're not contributing to them. I mean, Woodbury, Inver Grove Heights, Shakopee, Lakeville, these are communities that are shouldering a lot of growth. And it may not seem as much on the percentage thing, you know, if you only have 100 people and you add 100 people, that's 100% growth. When you have, you know, 45 or 65,000 people and you're adding 20,000 people, it's still a huge lift, particularly when it's greenfield development and you've got to figure out where all of the pipes and ponds and all of that stuff sort of have to go. So I'm a little worried about completely cutting them out. If we could find a way to at least participate with them a little bit, it would seem more fair to me, rather than fully paying for some communities and telling some of the ones that really have to deal with change and big growth that we're not going to partner with you.
Cool. And I know this is time for feedback, but I didn't know, Angela, if you wanted to comment as we go, or do you just want to absorb the feedback as we go?
For now, just absorb the feedback and
Great.
see how the rest of you are, if you're having similar concerns or not. But we're happy to, look at adjustments over time. The changes that that you're seeing before you here are those that reflect the priorities of the Land Use Advisory Committee. And they were thinking that growth wasn't as much of a factor and that they wanted to focus the assistance on the smaller communities.
Thank you. Thanks. Further response to the staff prompt questions, Councilmember Carter, or anything yet?
Okay, I thought I saw.
No, I meant you're not limited to just these prompt questions. Any input as well.
I really appreciate the update and want to thank you for the work that has gone into drafting, in particular, also the small communities assistance program. I think that is going to benefit us all very, very greatly as we provide better opportunity for those communities to feel as though they have capacity, along with our help, to get this work done. I do know also, I had the same concern about the larger communities over 35,000 and just wondered, okay, so they just kind of feel like we dropped them off. I understand that because as communities grow, they have to have more planning capacity and exercise that planning as more a regular part of life. I do understand that every decision we make is balanced with another opportunity or chance to say yes or no. And so I understand how you're weighing that. Do we continue to provide that kind of assistance financially to the larger communities? I do also recognize that although it may not be that financial help, we have the capacity, we're providing tools. We are working to ensure that every community feels that it has some assistance from us. So I'm torn, but just want you to know that I understand the thinking around how we make one thing work and perhaps have the ability then to move forward in another way with other communities. So with that kind of assessment of how I'm thinking about it, can you feedback, how do we, with those other 35,000 and greater population communities, help them to feel the help, that we are still there, that, we simply are acknowledging their need to have that capacity on their own to continue this work financially. And that's where I land, Can you help me with that a little bit? What's your thinking?
Chair and committee members, it was a direct question, so I was going to answer that one. As I started the presentation introduction today, I mentioned these are just two of our programs. And so you heard from Emma talking about the local planning handbook. A lot of what is embedded in the local planning handbook is very hard to, we understand the capacity that's within the local planning handbook, but it includes many tools like the GHG emissions tool. There's a strategy, I forget the name of it, Strategy Bank.
Strategy planning tool.
Yeah, strategy planning tool. Those are tools specifically that will help with the new climate planning requirements. We have the sector representative program, which while not in here, is a robust and active group of planners that work individually with local governments, answering questions, guiding them through any process that they might be navigating. The sector representative program allows us to go out to communities where we're invited and talk to planning commissions or city councils about a Met Council 101 or a comp plan 101. Why are we doing this kind of regional planning 101? We can do all of those kinds of things. We provide through all of our other technical teams, there's technical experts on housing and water and transportation and parks, et cetera, that we work with as local governments have questions. And a lot of times our housing staff, for example, will go out and talk to a planning commission or a city council as well on any specific issues. So there's a lot of other programs and tools and resources that are built into some of the things that we're mentioning today, but that actually have a lot of depth to them.
If I might, Mr.
Please,
Chair.
Councilmember.
Thank you for those additional comments. I am also wondering if in the local planning guide process, with all of the tools that are embedded there, we are planning workshops or any way of working with those staffs coming from multiple communities, just to show these tools and make sure that they're confident and competent in using them.
Chair and committee members, shame on me, I forgot one of our biggest programs, which is the Planet program, which is a educational and training program that we offer. We coordinate internally with all of our technical staff to prepare presentations, webinars, workshops. We're going to host a conference, all free to the local planners, talking specifically about how you can meet local comprehensive planning requirements. We also do a lot of training or educational opportunities on things that communities can do to get more out of their plan, not just the minimums, but beyond the basics. And so we'll be launching that program again as well. We had that last time as well. We'll launch that again this time around. So we really tried to find ways to connect local governments with local governments, but also to make sure that we are communicating as clearly as possible how to meet those minimum requirements. For those that just want to do the basics, we try to provide them a very specific path where they can do that in an efficient and cost-effective manner.
Thank you, and I appreciate your sharing with me responses to that question as you work to balance, because clearly there's going to be some concern and some pain, in not having the financial assistance. And so I know you'll be working to balance these considerations as you move forward. Thank you for all of the tools and assistance that you've mentioned.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So on page 5 with the grant eligibility, can you tell us what the logic was to change the 2030 criteria from net tax capacity, the overall NTC, to NTC per capita? And if that informs the 35,000 person threshold or vice versa?
So was your first question, why in 2030 was it just flat net tax capacity, and why did they move per capita? It is my sense that net tax capacity of a community, which is essentially the amount of financial resources they have to provide services in their community. You could have two communities that say both theoretically at $1 million, but maybe one of those communities has 100 people and the other has 100,000. So that's a very different ability to sort of service their constituents. So I think in 2040, they decided to make it net tax capacity per capita, which is a better reflection of how much money do you have to provide services for all of the people in your community. And then what was your second?
And if there was any relationship with that explanation with the 35,000 person threshold?
No, the current population is purely a consideration of the observation that as you get a larger population, communities tend to add staff and expertise around planning, transportation, water, parks, and that the larger communities, even if you don't consider tax base per capita, they just have a lot more financial resources. So the cost of a comprehensive plan relative to their overall budget for that city is quite small, whereas in a small community, a comprehensive plan item can be considered quite a large item ticket on their budget.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Carter's questions. Much of the cost that cities incur is for engineering studies. There's a lot of stuff that's done in-house, but the engineering studies almost always have to be done by consultants, because having somebody with that level of knowledge on your staff all the time is not necessarily something that you can, justify a workload for things that are more episodic in nature. And like, for example, the city of Lakeville, they have a full planning staff, but they also had a consultant that was just coordinating the overall comp plan plus all of the engineering studies, and that was $300,000 the last time. So we're not talking about a small rounding error in your budget. $300,000 is a substantial investment. And last time we gave City of Lakeville $30,000, which is only 10%, but it at least then feels like we're in partnership and not just, here we're making you guys do stuff kind of a thing.
Further discussion? Just briefly to hit the question prompts, like Councilmember Wolf, I'm really supportive, especially of the small communities planning program. I think that's really exciting and a response from certainly. I just represent one city in one county, so I won't have any participating, but I think for the good of the region, and I think there's an interesting dynamic here between growth and assistance that's worth exploring some. And shoot, I had one more thing to say. Oh, and then as we look at the budget, and I think a lot of us will be really interested in seeing that, how that fits with the overall budget. And, in these budget decisions, there's always that. I think Councilmember Carter was kind of hitting on this. Some winners or losers, right? And so those are some of the decisions we'll have to make, what to prioritize or how much to spend on this system out of our total budget. Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
My one request for additional information would be a list of the net tax capacity per capita for the whole region, so that I can kind of understand what that means. I need to look at those spreadsheets to really get in my head what 100% means, or 150% or whatever.
Makes sense. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And are you interested in that per community?
Yes.
Yeah. And what we do, we baseline the regional median or regional average median net tax capacity we call 100%.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're over 100%, you're above the regional median. If you're below 100%, you're below. But that's certainly data that we have.
Thank you.
Cool. Anything else, committee members? Ms. Torres, anything else from your team?
Chair and committee members, just if you have any additional direction for the Land Use Advisory Committee, I think that they would find more specificity helpful. We do have a program of things that we will be analyzing. Obviously, we will be eventually bringing a map and list of communities that are eligible or not for the various programs. So that's kind of on the docket, but I guess I'm a little unclear. You mentioned, Councilmember Wolf, wanting to Chair Lilligren, exploring growth. And so would you like us to re-examine the growth factor that we looked at earlier this year, or bring that back into the fold, so to speak?
Thanks, Ms. Torres, and maybe I would turn to Councilmember Wolf. She has further sort of guidance here, but that would have escaped my mind. This was my point when I went into, I only represent one city, right?
Yeah,
but,
sure.
And so I know many council members are interested in what we're talking about. I think Director Barajas, she's put an email out to the whole council, trying to solicit more input. I suspect that as this percolates through the public process, there will be more interest, but I wouldn't have thought of what Councilmember Wolf referenced, that even if the city may be over 35,000, if their projected growth is considerable, planning for that. And I think Ms. Clapsmith, you said yourself, it's the, or somebody said, not just Councilmember Wolf, but it's the engineering piece, those kind of really, those specialty areas that are the most costly. And so I appreciate that LUAC has spent time on this, and I really take their guidance to heart, and that they didn't prioritize growth. And maybe it's knowing, maybe for me, it's knowing why they deprioritized growth. And perhaps Councilmember Wolf.
Having some understanding of how would that affect, if you looked at the communities that are seeing 15 or 20,000 more people, which is substantial.
Right.
What is their net tax capacity? Because if they're not, wealthy, but they're having to deal with all of this growth on the backs of the existing taxpayers, traditionally, we've always tried to have growth sort of pay for growth, and this is one place where it doesn't necessarily do that. It falls on the existing taxpayers. So understanding the net tax capacity and those big growth cities, where they fit in compared to the other programs, because if they've all got 150% of net tax capacity, okay, that solves it. But if they're more moderate in their resources, saying you have to pay for all of this is maybe not the right answer. That's basically where I'm going. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you for that clarification.
Do you want to add something or ask a question?
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that the thought on not using the growth rate is that in talking to planners here who worked with a lot of communities during the 2040 cycle, with consultants who work with a lot of communities during that cycle, different types of communities, what they observed is they did not feel that the high growth communities had a higher level of planning burden than older communities that were aging. And the reason is that because aging communities have a whole set of things that they're having to figure out for their future that are different than new communities. They're looking at aging infrastructure. They're often looking at shifting housing stock, infill and redevelopment issues, maybe old manufacturing or brownfield sites. And all of those activities take a lot of planning to figure out how you're repositioning aging infrastructure, aging development as you move into the future. And that is a burden that's maybe equivalent in a planning level to you have a new green field and you're figuring out how it's going to build out. So that was the rationale.
Thank you, Ms. Cluster. That's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, committee members? Cool. And we're cool here, Ms. Torres. Everything, yep.
I'm cool.
Thank you. You are very cool.
I'm not cool. Not with you, just generally.
All right. Anything else, Director Barajas?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like to share, we're really excited. I'm glad that we're able to dig in with council members and our Land Use Advisory Committee like we're able to do and have all of this support. This is a program, this whole set of programs, not just the Planning Assistance Program, the Local Planning Handbook, the Planet Training Series, and our Sector Rep program together as a package are an award-winning package. We received national recognition in the last cycle from the American Planning Association for this comprehensive set of planning supports that we provide within our region. And lots of other regions have contacted us since then to say, how do you guys do all that? And then a lot of the times that we have to say, well, we're special. But a lot of the other times are because we have this great structure here of setup of these supports of really wanting to provide that assistance supports from policymakers like you and from our Land Use Advisory Committee that really help to inform how we deliver what local governments need from us in order to be successful. So we're really excited for continuing to grow this, no pressure team, but continuing to do this work and thankful to have all of your support in this as well.
Thank you. And thanks to the local planning assistance team as well. Michelle, anything else for the committee? Ooh, we'll see no further business before this committee. We're adjourned.